order. At this time, are there any declarations of interest on any of the topics that we're about to present? Don't see any at this time, so we'll continue. First presentation, Emily Souza. I think Emily is online with us. Emily's from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and like to present on farm preservation and ministerial zoning. Emily, go ahead.
Perfect, thank you so much. I'm just going to get myself set up here. Okay. Sarah, would you mind if I shared my slides? Is that okay? Thank you.
Absolutely, Emily. My apologies.
No, that's okay. I just have my timing set up. Okay, can you see my slides okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here today to speak to land use planning considerations, specifically farmland preservation and minister's zoning orders, or MZOs, for agriculture in Grey County. So before we begin, I figured I would, of course, take a moment to introduce myself. I only recently started at the Ontario Federation of Agriculture about 6 months ago. So today I have the privilege of meeting so many people on the line for the first time. My name is Emily Souza, and I am the Land Use Policy Analyst in the Research Department at the OFA. I am a candidate registered professional planner with the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, and most recently I graduated from the University of Guelph's Rural Planning and Development Program. So while I only started my current role at OFA 6 months ago, my portfolio has been nothing but busy. I chat every single day with farmers all across the province who are so knee-deep in land use issues that they sound like planners themselves. While Grey County has such supportive municipal staff who recognize and value agriculture for what it is, the planning profession in general may not necessarily be well-versed or trained in planning for agricultural areas. So a thriving agricultural industry, as you all know, depends on the knowledge and the support provided by our municipal governments. Municipal staff need to develop capacity, expertise, and time to effectively respond to the many emerging opportunities and challenges facing agriculture, such as farmland preservation and growth management, ag viability in the agri-food network, on-farm diversification, MZOs, and more. So let's talk about farmland preservation. So I don't need to tell you that farmland is an essential resource for the sustainability and security of our food systems, environments, and economies. However, the capacity of farmland and agricultural industries to provide this value depends on the availability and the quality of farmland available. Less than 5% of Canada's land base is made up of prime agricultural land, and over half of Class 1 land is in Ontario. Yet we continuously lose farmland every single day. Based on the 2016 census, Ontario lost about 175 acres of farmland a day. And most recently, in the 2021 census, which we're here to talk about today, Ontario has lost an estimated 319 acres of farmland a day. If we boil the numbers down to Grey County, we have lost just over 47,000 acres of farmland over the last 5 years, an equivalent to 26 acres of farmland a day. So this means that we're slowly losing our ability to provide safe, affordable, and sustainable food, fiber, and fuel for Ontario, Canada, and of course, the rest of the world. So we know that we're losing farmland, but what exactly does the census data tell us? So first off, I think it's important to clarify that the census measures the number of farmland acres that are available. It is a question of how many acres of farmland are in production on census day. So it'll include land and crops, pasture lands, fallow land, wetlands and woodlands, and other lands. So as an example, a site that was redesignated to an industrial use, but is yet to get some shovels in the ground for development, and also has a farmer renting the land in the interim, would theoretically be counted in the census as farmland, even though it has already been destined for development. So any farmland that is not in production anymore will be counted as a loss. And whether that is because it has been paved over for urban development, or farmers sold their farm to a different landowner who just wants to live on the farm and maybe not actively produce on it, kind of like a rural estate situation, or perhaps farmers are leaving agriculture because of viability issues, or we even see the impact of commodity prices on the makeup of these lands, like how we have seen a shift with the area of cropped acres increasing and pastured acres decreasing. In short, the census captures all the ways that farmland in active production may be lost. But some areas are actually reporting an increase in farmable land. So for example, in an interview with the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Lisa Thompson, she's quoted as stating that productive farmland increased by 30,000 acres across Ontario in this most recent census period. So we did see an increase of 30,000 acres in productive farmland, or specifically land and crops. However, to make up for this increase in land for crop production, Ontario lost more than 110,000 acres in pasture, which is a 22% decrease, and almost 500,000 acres in all other land making up census farms. So while there is an increase in cropland, there is a decrease across all other types of farmlands, resulting in a net loss of over 580,000 acres. 580,000 acres of census farm area from 2016 to 2021. So as I mentioned, overall, we are reporting a loss of farmable land. And regardless of the reason, it is a loss. And it's a loss of a critical resource. Planning needs to consider all reasons for farmland loss and create policies to support farmers and protect farmland. A prime example of this policy avenue is on-farm diversified uses, which help balance farmland protection objectives with opportunities for development to provide additional revenue streams for farmers. So one of my favorite quotes that I think captures this message of the conversation is that to preserve agriculture, it is not enough to preserve just the land. Society must also preserve the farmer. So are we curious to know how much land has been lost to urban development specifically? This is a pretty popular topic. Well, as I mentioned before, the census does not measure this directly. Instead, data on the number of official plan amendments approved to convert farmland to a different use would be more accurate and timely. So research at the University of Guelph reports that between 2000 and 2017, 545 official plan amendments were approved and led to the loss of over 72,000 acres of prime farmland, so not all farmland, just prime farmland in Ontario. In the same period, 136 official plan amendments alone resulted in the loss of 336 acres of prime land in Grey. While Grey does not see the same pressure for development as other counties do, it does illustrate the cumulative impact of seemingly small planning decisions that have on the grand total of farmland loss across the province. We all know and recognize that this land loss is unsustainable. So the way that we plan for our communities for the present and into the future means making planning decisions which firmly prioritize the protection of this land. This includes designing land use policies and making decisions which keep growth within fixed urban boundaries and intensify urban areas where possible. Remember that agricultural land preservation and growth management are two sides of the same coin. You can't be in favor of protecting farmland without supporting urban intensification. So in terms of OFA's position, we believe that the preservation of our productive agricultural lands, whether they are prime or not, for the ability to produce food, fiber, and fuel is in Ontario's interest. And we support the efforts of our county federations to stem the effects of urban growth on agricultural lands within their municipalities. So next I'll speak to Minister's Zoning Orders, or MZOs. So while not directly part of the municipal land use planning process, MZOs directly impact municipalities' ability to appropriately plan for and support agricultural uses. So what is an MZO? Under Section 47 of the Planning Act, an MZO is a measure that Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing can implement to control any use of land in the province, therefore bypassing any municipal planning approval processes in place which account for local interests, contexts, public input, and more. MZOs are intended to be sparingly exercised by the government to advance a planning project in case of an emergency, such as with the rapid development of a hospital, airport, or other institution, which could greatly benefit the public interest in our time of need. In other cases, they may be used for municipalities without municipal organization and are without their own official plans or zoning bylaws. And in terms of OFA's position, these are uses of MZOs that we support. However, we are currently seeing an unprecedented use of MZOs issued in municipalities with their own robust planning systems. The present provincial government has issued more MZOs than any other government from 1995 to 2018 combined. These MZOs have disproportionately impacted farmland. Since 2019, over 2,000 acres of farmland have been lost to MZOs, where these land uses would not have otherwise been permitted under provincial or municipal policy. And most recently, the provincial government amended the Planning Act so that any MZO would not have to be consistent with the PPS, including not having regard for matters of provincial interest, such as farmland protection. And it's been argued that these MZOs are issued for economic recovery. However, This is not sufficiently justified in the eyes of OFA. We have yet to see evidence that the short-lived economic boom by converting farmland into industrial or residential development in any way compares to the over 860,000 jobs and nearly $50 billion in GDP that the agricultural industry is known to contribute to Ontario's economy. So OFA does not support the use of MZOs, of course, to develop farmland in Ontario. The only mechanism for development on farmland that we support is through adherence to the PPS and through robust local planning systems, where considerations for agriculture and the provincial interest are included and a level playing field open to public consultation is maintained. So lastly, an additional type of MZO was added to the Planning Act, most recently in this past April. This MZO is referred to as the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator, or the CHIA order, or informally, as we like to call it, MZO 2.0. This CHIA order follows much of the same rules as a Section 47 MZO, as I just discussed. However, the minister issues a CHIA order at the request of a single tier or lower tier municipality. So municipalities must endorse and support this CHIA order for it to be approved. The Planning Act now sets out the process and rules for municipalities to request these orders, including those that are outlined in what are now draft CHIA order guidelines. The CHIA guideline regulates land use and the location, height, size, and spacing of buildings and structures to permit certain types of development. Requesting municipalities are required to provide public notice and consultation on the CHIA order. And in issuing the CHIA order, the minister can exempt other necessary planning-related approvals from provincial plans, the PPS, municipal official plans, but only if this is requested by the municipality. And the minister can only issue CHIA orders outside of the Greenbelt area. So note that while CHIA, or the acronym CHIA, implies that the order can only be used for infrastructure and housing, a municipality can request a CHIA order for virtually any type of land use development. So, of course, OFA believes providing advance public notice for MZOs and any amendments to them are important. And while we view this additional power and autonomy provided to municipalities as positive, MZOs are still proliferating amongst this government to fast-track development at the expense of good planning outcomes, and in many situations, disregards for matters of provincial interest. This continuous unprecedented use of MZOs is a threat, what we view as a threat, that will result in the loss of farmland to development, regardless of whom they may be issued or requested by. Municipalities can simultaneously request support or withdraw support for an MZO. At the local level, the public can influence whether their municipality endorses a CHIA order. So while a lot of hope may be lost when it comes to an MZO, the local community may have more influence and realize when it comes to this type of order. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I would like to thank you for inviting me here today and for everybody for listening. And I hope that everyone on the call can walk away learning a little bit more about various issues impacting farmers and agriculture today and the ways that planning plays a role in supporting agriculture. So similar to how we view climate change, policymakers need to look to the future. When it comes to farming, OFA wants to ensure the next generation has the resources and land to produce food, fiber, and fuel for the future. So feel free to engage with OFA and your local county federation to learn more about how we can support each other and achieve our mission of farms and food together. So thank you, and I now welcome any chance for a discussion.
All right. Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. Lots of good information there in a quick, concise format. Any questions, comments from the group at this time? For Emily. One question I had, Emily, we talked about agriculture and we talked about, developed areas. Often we don't give the buffer areas, conservation areas, a lot of thought, and there usually is that area in between development and agriculture. We've seen a lot of our conservation budgets kind of have been, shrunk and somewhat limited over the years. I don't think OFA spends a lot of time looking at it, but that's also a part of that same land use puzzle. Any comments on that? What's happening with those areas that are used for either recreation or just buffer areas that are part of our ecosystem and definitely part of the long-term environment issues.
Yeah, certainly. It is a consideration and one that kind of overlaps multiple of our portfolios. We have somebody that works specifically in our research department, Tina Shankula, who works with conservation authorities on that end and conservation lands, as well as overlaps into my portfolio, which covers natural heritage systems. So it is a component that we're looking at, that interface between conservation lands and natural areas and how that impacts agriculture. And specifically what we may view as a loss in terms of those buffer areas that farmers are required to maintain or, have an impact on their operation. And so at this time, we have undertaken some smaller projects and we are looking at those policy implications. But to be honest, specifically with so many new policies coming into official plans to conform with the growth plan natural heritage system, we're still trying to learn of these implications because it is quite new and how this is going to impact farmers' operations, but it is certainly on our radar.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? RJ?
Emily, thank you very much for that presentation. It's very eye-opening, and I appreciated you bringing it into the Grey County context for what we're losing right here in our own backyard. You mentioned very quickly, like the data is kind of hard to track for how much farmland, or specifically prime farmland, is lost to development. My question's more around, especially it's been accelerated in the last 2 years, but we are seeing this big urban shift. And there's lots of ways. There's the second home. There's the people buying farms, but just cash cropping them. There is like the specific, buying a farm and not using it anymore. How is there a way that perhaps OFA is advocating for, or like, how can we be tracking that data? Like, do we really not have that sort of insight at all?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and honestly something that I grapple with my contacts at OMAFRA weekly is just the lack of transparency, I guess, and collection of data. So typically what we've been using, as I mentioned, is the census, which calculates or accounts for all those reasons, right? But it isn't really giving us a nuanced picture as to how or why we're losing farmland. So that's why OMAFRA specifically has been funding research from out of the University of Guelph to account for prime agricultural land loss through Wayne Caldwell, and now Sarah Epp is continuing that research up until 2022 to look at reasons for urban development. So whether that's through settlement area boundary expansions, so widespread, or even right down to site-specific amendments. So, you're building an additional home or an estate or whatnot, or an on-farm diversified use on your property, and that's taking physical land out of production. So, unfortunately, there isn't I wish there was a cohesive or comprehensive set of data that really was disaggregated to this level, but we're just trying to work with what we have.
Yeah.
So.
Can I follow up with that? So, is there any municipality that is sort of taking it on to track some of that data themselves?
That is a good question. I don't have the answer myself. From my experience in working with county federations and advocacy at the local level, no. We are often pulling data ourselves from the census, and then also as well as Wayne Caldwell's research, because he disaggregates that right down to the municipality, and we're trying to say this, listen, this is what's been collected. I understand, of course, municipalities will have their collection of OPAs and zoning bylaw amendments available, but whether or not they're tracking how much of that has been lost I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, suggestions from the group? Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to, on behalf of county staff, definitely thank Emily Sousa and OFA for the research. This is wonderful, and this is really helpful to people like Philly and Liz and myself in terms of looking at making recommendations on policies moving forward. I thought just very briefly to build on some of what Emily has shared, I'd share more of the local context on some of this, and similar to the challenges that she noted in terms of that data and that RJ spoke to. Some pieces of data we have great accessibility to. So anything that required a planning application, if it was a severance application, a zoning amendment, an official plan amendment, between the county and our member municipalities, we have good access to that data, and we regularly share that data with groups like the University of Guelph. They were doing some research during the pandemic on the number of the amount of lot creation throughout prime agricultural areas. So we were working with Wayne and his team on that. What we have a lot less access to is individual owners and their production in that regard. And as Emily said, we are seeing some people buy farms and choose not to farm them. We're seeing others buy farms and lease out the land. And another sort of increasing trend that we're seeing is people buying, in some cases marginal land, in some cases slightly more productive land, and trying to naturalize it, if you will. In some cases, placing conservation easements on top. And so from a county staff perspective, it's certainly something that we struggle with, because from a climate change and nature-based solutions perspective, there's a lot of merit to some of that, and especially if it was marginal, not very productive land to begin with, it probably makes a lot of sense. But when we see someone buy a beautiful 100-acre farm that was very productive, there's a tear in the planner's eyes, so to speak. It's a challenge for sure. The other thing I'd just like to build on something that Emily said is, she pointed to on-farm diversified uses as a source of vitality in the agricultural community. And Emily might be modest to say this, but she and some of her colleagues from the University of Guelph, prior to her role at OFA, undertook some comprehensive research on on-farm diversified use policies across the province. And Grey County has certainly benefited from that. But the one thing I will say that we've seen locally is we've seen lots of instances where people were able to have an on-farm diversified use and have a secondary source of farm income, and then invest some of those earnings back into the land. And particularly down in Southgate and in what they used to call float and protein, we've seen a lot of instances of people installing an OFDU and then using that money to do things like tile drainage. And in some cases, they've taken what was fairly marginal lands based on a high water table or drainage issues, and created very farmable lands, if you will. And then finally, and I'll be quiet here soon, with respect to the MZOs, it's certainly something that county staff also have concerns over. Luckily, so far in Grey County, we've seen very limited use of MZOs. Certainly in my time at the county, the only ones we've seen passed actually were just last year, and that was around the settlement area of Dundalk. But we don't seem to have the pressures to go that route that we have seen in other, larger urban communities, maybe closer to the GTA in that regard. But it's certainly something we're monitoring. And as Emily mentioned, we're also monitoring that new CHIA tool that she referenced. And certainly it's something that we could report back to this committee on in the future. Anyway, I've rambled on here long enough, but thank you very much to Emily for her informative presentation.
All right, Scott, always value your input on this committee, and it sounds like you and Emily are in contact on a regular basis within your department, so that's good to see. Philly, you'd like to add to the discussion?
I do, and briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Emily. I think your presentation was excellent and really demonstrated the incredible difficulty in pulling the nuanced whys out of the data that we have available. So RJ, you asked whether there were any municipalities digging into the data, and we have in fact done some data visualizations on land tenure in Grey County over the last 3 census periods. It's very rudimentary at this point. And later in today's meeting, I will share a few of those visualizations just so you can get an idea of the information that we have to work with. It is just based on the census data at this point, but it is going to lead us to the questions we need to be asking, and specifically to the municipal partners that we need to be working with, who have seen the greatest change, to find out what is going on there and why. So we're just in the beginning stages, and I will share that with you later in the meeting today. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Philly. Any more questions, concerns, comments from the group? If not, we'll like to thank Emily for your presentation. You've attached your contact information, so anytime we need to get a hold of you, I think we certainly can. So again, we appreciate, and please stay in touch with your OFA affiliates in Grey County and as well as county staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Our next topic presentation is Ben LaFord. Ben, I think you're online with us, correct? Ben has a presentation on the interest rates and the impacts on the local farming community. Go ahead, Ben.
Sure, great. Okay, let me just my presentation up. Okay, yeah, thank you everyone for having me here to speak this morning. I think it's obviously a very timely topic, which is going to continue to unfold over the next year or so, which is the impact of higher inflation and as a result, higher interest rates in Canada and what that might mean for farm businesses, for Canadian farm businesses. So starting with a bit of a backdrop here, farm debt loads in terms of total amount of debt has been increasing quite significantly over the past decade since the recession 07-08 and massive reductions of interest rates, and we had a very low levels of interest rates for quite a long time. So what we've seen is the total outstanding farm debt in Ontario is up 131% from 2007 to 2021. And that is largely a function, and here's a visualization of the total outstanding farm debt at the Canadian level. So in 2007, just under 60 billion in total farm debt. And as of 2021, we're up to 129 billion dollars in total farm debt outstanding. So this really wasn't so big an issue. I see a slight increase each year over 14-year period, and that's coinciding really with a period of largely reduction in interest rates. So really what's critical in terms of farm finance is your ability to service that debt, not necessarily the total amount of debt itself. Is what's the total amount of debt and interest on that debt relative to your income. And so servicing those debt loads has been manageable during that time, as I mentioned, for flat and declining rates until recently. So this year we have higher inflation, and as a result, the Bank of Canada has been hiking interest rates quite aggressively. So the beginning of the year, the Bank of Canada overnight rate was at 0.25%. And as of their most recent meeting, it is all the way up to 2.25%. So a 200 basis point increase in the first half of the year, with more increases expected. The consensus would be that there probably will be more hikes in the fall as well, depending on what data they get in on the economy, employment, GDP versus inflation. So this is the largest, we haven't seen a significant this level of an increase in interest rates in quite some time. And we haven't seen it ever with this level of debt load. And I think that's kind of what it has a lot of people potentially concerned. What about the impact might be? So again, as I mentioned, why are interest rates rising at this rate? It's simply to combat high inflation. Inflation is another thing we haven't seen in quite a long time. That coinciding period of low interest rates also had quite low inflation, where we often struggle to get inflation, above 2% in some of those years post 2008. So pulling, on some of the FCC data here. So high, inflation. Inflation is one of those issues where it really brings economics into the spotlight because everyone feels it. Farmers are no exemption. Fertilizer costs are up 50%. Farm fuel costs are up 35%. A lot of other input costs have been rising significantly this year. So there's the issue too of rising interest rates, but also all these other input costs required to make production are also rising at the same time, and both are linked, right? It's the inflation that's causing the interest rates. So we have farm inputs rising as at the same time that farm financing costs are rising significantly. So yeah, again, we're not the only sector that's feeling this. It's pretty across the board. The last, as of May, the official CPI data was coming in at 7.7% year-over-year increase. It has been some time since Canada has seen that level of 1 year rise in inflation. So what is the Bank of Canada hoping to do is raise interest rates to lower aggregate demand in the economy. Inflation is caused by many things, some of which is outside of the Bank of Canada's control. It can't control the price of oil or what happens in geopolitical conflicts around the world, but it can, to some degree, influence the aggregate demand for goods within the Canadian economy. So one component of what causes inflation is, too much money chasing too few goods. And when interest rates are rock bottom, it's easier to borrow money to do all sorts of things. And consumers have been borrowing money to finance largely their lifestyle for quite a long time. And the higher the interest rates are, the less ability people have to consume from debt, to use debt to consume. But it also increases the cost for businesses to invest. So there's three primary ways in which an interest rate hikes impact farm businesses. Obviously, the cost of borrowing new money rises, or if you have variable rate debt, that will rise as well. That factors significantly into investment decisions and farmland values. So another thing that's happened over the last 14 years is we've seen a large run up in farmland values. And part of a large part of what has caused that significant increase in farmland values is those rock bottom interest rates, where you could get a mortgage to purchase a property for $15,000 or $20,000 per acre. If interest rates are, if you have a mortgage of 3 or 4%, it's more difficult if the mortgage is 5 or 6% or higher. So, and it's not just farmland that farmers use to finance investment decisions. It's an extremely capital intensive industry, and is actually one of the industries in Canada that post the financial crisis that we're continuing to increase heavily, where a lot of other sectors may have been kind of scaling back debt and investment. Farmers were piling it in because farm machinery, combines, it's not just farmland. It's a lot of very high price tag items that farmers wouldn't have the cash flow necessary to purchase. So they use financing to do it. And when interest rates are rock bottom, that's quite appealing. But higher interest rates now increase the cost of borrowing. So that increases the cost of borrowing, it lowers the amount of on-farm investment, and will put, likely all else equal, puts negative pressure on farmland values. How all of this will play out, we're not sure yet. This is very much an ongoing story. And if inflation levels off, hopefully we get a bit of a leveling off in the pressure on farm financing, but we don't know what the future holds. Going back, so how will we measure these impacts? So again, it's not necessarily the total debt level or even just the interest rate. It's those two factors relative to farm income. So what we're really concerned about from a macro perspective is the ag industry's ability to service debt. So the key variable that FCC uses is the interest coverage ratio, which is firms' net income, not including their interest payments, divided by their interest costs. So really what we're looking to get with that ICR is looking at how many dollars of revenue does a farm have for every dollar of interest payments it has to make. So this is a measure of the farm's ability to manage debt loads. And the higher this number, the better a farm can manage debt, because it means they have more dollars of revenue per dollar of interest costs. And so this is, again, from FCC data. This is at the national level. Ontario often is indicative of the national level, given our number of farms and our diversity of farms we have in Ontario. So this is showing that ICR, that farmers' ability to manage debt over the past 40 years. I guess I'll start on the right hand side of this. From 2007 until 2021, that number had been looking mostly quite good. And a lot of this was driven by reduced interest rates, right? So even if farm income remains the same from 2007 on, interest rates were largely trending downwards year over year. And that made it easier for farmers to manage their debt. Later in that cycle, when we really see massive increases in the coverage level, also corresponded with higher commodity prices. And you have higher commodity prices on lower interest rates. Farmers are more easily able to manage their debt loads. And then we see that number spiked down in 2019, which is a difficult year for farm income. Trade issues were really taking its toll on Canadian agriculture in that year, and it's reflected in that debt servicing level. 2021 was actually a banner year for net farm income. And interest rates, again, were rock bottom. So you see that number just shoot right back up when we had a really, really strong year in net farm income. What really matters, though, is where do we go from here, right? And again, no one knows for sure, but FCC kind of has three baseline plausible scenarios here, which are shown by the A, B, C points on this graph. And I'll mention to start that one of the assumptions in their analysis is that net farm income remains at a record high in 2022. So this is the numbers if we have a record level of farm income. If farm income is lower than expected, these numbers would drop significantly below where they are on that graph. So they have basically the soft landing scenario, point A, where the farmer's ability to manage debt is relatively where it's been the last 10 to 15 years. They have a scenario B, which essentially brings us back to a pre-08-09 scenario. And then we have point C, which basically takes us to where farmers' ability to manage debt was from 1981 to 2006, which would be a significantly more financial difficulty for many farmers. And this, again, is assuming a record level of farm income. So under these point C scenario would be a significant continuing rise in inflation and in interest rates. So that's the kind of baseline plausible scenarios where we're at, kind of where we've been the last 10 years, where we were pre 08-09, or where we were essentially back in the 80s and 90s. Hard to say at all. I definitely am not one to ever pull out the crystal ball of where we would land on these scenarios, but just to give a baseline of where we might be heading in 2022, 2023. So I just wanted to end it with a very quick discussion on, what can local government do, right? Because I'm sure that is, if I had to guess, that's in part at least of what sparked the interest in having me come here today to discuss this issue. So really, we're looking at, when we're talking about inflation and the impact of rising interest rates on farm business, we're looking at three factors: is that total interest costs, farm revenue, and farm expenses, other than interest rates, right? And of those three variables, there's not much local municipalities can necessarily do to impact farm revenue. That's largely driven by yield and commodity prices. Not much to do on interest costs either. That's the Bank of Canada, and that's inflation. That's where the markets, the bond markets, et cetera, will take interest rates, and there's not much to be done there. Farm expenses, there's not too much, but in the areas where Grey County could be supportive, they have been, which I do commend them for. And a few years ago, lowering the farm tax ratio from 0.25 to 0.218. And by including an exemption for farm buildings in the county level development charge bylaw, those are really two of the probably biggest areas that a municipality could help alleviate financial pressure for directly, at least for farm businesses. So I just wanted to end that my part of the discussion here with the thank you to Grey County for being a supportive of agriculture in those two particular scenarios. So that's all I have. Happy to open it up for any questions or discussions that you might have.
All right, thank you, Ben, for the presentation. It definitely is a very timely topic. Any comments, suggestions, questions to Ben from the group at this time? Lori, you've go ahead there.
First off, thank you very much, Ben, for that insightful presentation. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this to the table today was to ensure that everyone kind of knew the plight of the farmer. And something that I'll throw out to maybe share some more information. This is based, and maybe Philly's going to touch on this later too, and if so, I apologize, but some information that's coming out of the Census of Agriculture numbers. Emily in our office has been deeply poring over the information. And something I wanted to share was just two stats. So on average, this is nationally, on average for every dollar in revenues, farms incurred 83 cents in expenses. That's nationally. Locally in Grey County, the numbers that Emily has found is in Grey County for every dollar in revenues, farms incurred 92 cents in expenses. We don't know what the answer is there. It's alarming and certainly makes it extremely difficult for our local farmers. So just sorting it out. We don't know the answer, like I said, but something to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Now, if I could just quickly add to what you just said there too. So that's actually quite useful number. I would quickly add, so I showed that graph of the three scenarios for farms' ability to manage debt. That from what you just told me there, that would likely imply to me that those three dots, A, B, and C, you would lower each of those scenarios for local Grey County farmers, and if their expense to revenue ratio is where it is. So that would give us plausible belief to think that rising interest rates would have an even more disproportional negative impact on farmers locally than those national numbers that I had presented.
Go ahead, Kim.
Thank you. I don't think I have anything really stellar to add, only to say that I see this as so concerning when it's paired with what we understand to be the mental health crisis in the ag sector. I remember 20% interest rates, and when you see the people in your family that your back's against the wall. I don't know what the answer is going forward, but if there are things that can be done through the commodity organizations or the general farm organizations to provide support to people, I think we want to be really sensitive to that. It's a tough place to be when things change so quickly. And the one thing about farming is it's not just your business, it's your family usually, and that's a lot for anybody to carry.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, definitely true. Lori, did you want to add to that?
Just wanted to provide a phone number for the Farmer Wellness Initiative. It is 1-866 267-6255. Share that number with anyone that you think needs it today and in the future.
Great, thank you, Lori. Any other comments, suggestions from the group at this point for Ben? If there's not, we'd like to thank Ben for your input there. Definitely a timely topic, and it'll likely stick with us for the next couple of years anyway.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt, I think RJ had a comment as well.
Oh, sorry, RJ.
Oh, it's okay. No, you can keep going, John.
And
sure?
and Kathy's hand is up as well.
All right, Kathy, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that some people might ask, why does the farmer just not like hold back on investments? But we're seeing such a downturn in the ability to attract labor to the farm that a lot of farmers are making investments in order to be able to carry on with business. And whether that's robots or bigger equipment, better equipment, more efficient equipment, all of those things. So it's not just as easy as, oh, well, we'll put off these investments. If there's not enough people or hands to do the work, then, and just my thoughts.
Thank you, Kathy. Sorry, RJ, go ahead.
Well, since I thought I'd follow up on Kathy's too. So I also just, we've talked a lot about input costs. So I just wanted to highlight very quickly too, when we're talking at sort of the reality of farming right now, I find that almost all of my suppliers, from plastic to boxes to fish feed, which in the last 2 quarters alone has increased over 20%. I find that we're also being sort of nailed with all of these cuts. But when I go and I try and talk to some of my major customers, like retail environments or large distributors, they're really not accepting large price increases to make up for that. So in addition, we're talking about all the input costs, but I also wanted to highlight that there are definitely a lot of companies adding markups and increasing prices right now, but I really find that not translating down to the farmer. So just wanted to highlight that too as another source of anxiety. Thank you.
All right, thank you, RJ. All right, we'll like to thank Ben and move on to Franco Nacarado. Is that right, Franco? Franco has a presentation on the meat and poultry industry in Ontario. So we'd like to hear from you, Franco. One question first. Is that leftover breakfast in the back, or are you working on lunch?
It's lunch. We're at the finest meat competition, and we got to cook up some steaks for the team.
Perfect. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody. I appreciate being here today. Philly, thank you for the invitation to present. Always great to work with you. One of my favorite people across Ontario, always on the ball with leading the way. So thank you for all the work that you do. And RJ, good to see you, fellow LRIC board member. And everyone, wow, thank you for having me here today. So I'm gonna jump right into my presentation. I'm Franco Nacarado. I'm the Executive Director with Meat and Poultry Ontario. I've been here for the last 4 years. And today, Philly asked me to tell you about some research that we've done, but I feel a conversation about research is pointless unless you talk about what you're doing with that research and how you're implementing it. So I'm gonna put about a 45-minute presentation into 15 minutes. I'm gonna go really fast, but I'll leave some time at the end so you guys could ask questions. And if you wanna do follow-up on any one piece in particular, we could come back and do that as well. If I'm going overboard, feel free to tell me, Franco, you gotta wrap up, because I do have a lot here. So I want to try to give you guys as much as I can. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that okay? Good, okay. So, like I said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the meat poultry growth strategy, in particular, the farmer and abattoir surveys we did last year on economic opportunities for growth in the sector. I'm going to touch a little bit on innovation and technology research we did as well last year, and then talk about how that's helping us develop this meat and poultry growth strategy. And then talk about some of the things we have actually implemented since the study we did last year. So the study that we did was basically looking at 4 different things: trends and statistics on current local food opportunities. So how much local food's leaving the province, how much local food's being grown in the province, and what's the demand of products and what's coming in, that type of thing. So looking at plus and surplus and negative flows of food. We did an online survey of Ontario abattoirs, and we call that the abattoir survey. We did a farmer survey to ask them about challenges finding processing. And then we had a little bit of a pilot project on the side to look at it. We hear that there's a lot of farmers that don't have capacity to get processing done. So we did a little bit of an experiment last year to see if we might have a solution to use existing infrastructure that's already there. And actually, I'm going to start with that. So what we were hearing from farmers is there's not enough capacity. But as I was talking to abattoirs about different things, they always complained that there's always times when they actually in the last minute had openings and never had a way of filling those things. So we decided to explore this a little bit further. And what we did is we went out to farmers and asked them, what are the challenges in finding processing? And what we learned primarily from that was farmers were having to book a year out, and that really didn't allow them to adjust their purchases with the ebb and flows of the market. So if they had a high demand for for products, and they could buy 3, 4, 5 more animals from the live market, but had no way of getting those additional animals processed, so they lost those opportunities. On the abattoir side of things, we learned that the process of custom things is very manual process for them, and it takes a lot of time. So they're writing things down in a piece of paper, they're calling people, they're sending courier pigeons. It's very unorganized and needs a lot of work. And they have their systems, they're old, they're antiquated, but they work. And so we think that there's ways of modernizing that and trying to make it a little bit easier for them. And we actually ended up doing a quick pilot, very short, like 4 weeks. And basically we went out, we had already been talking to farmers and said, okay, if you're looking for processing in the next 4 to 6 weeks, let us know and we'll see if we can match you with an abattoir. At the same time, we reached out to a bunch of abattoirs and said, hey, if you have processing, let us know and we'll try to match you with some farmers. And we got about 16 requests. I think about 7 of them were actual legitimate requests that we could fulfill, and we fulfilled all 7 of them. There was a few others. One, I think that we couldn't work out logistically because the farmer wanted the product, but it was too far to get it processed, and there was no transportation option to get it. But we also got a lot of other weird requests that we kind of said, there's a lot more here than we think. So that was lesson 1. Now we'll go on to the statistical analysis we did. So we started off and we looked at the bad news, which is the number of abattoirs are declining. Since 1999, I think we've lost somewhere around 54% of abattoirs. And what's worse than that is we're just not renewing with the same number of ones that we're losing. So we're in a constant decline. And it's the renewal rate that really has me concerned. At the same time, the number of live animals is increasing. So as you can imagine, when we went out to farmers, a majority of them told us that they're actually experiencing growth problems. They would like to grow, but they're not able to do so. And 80% of them attribute it to further processing capacity. So the bottleneck clearly is the abattoirs, and we have something to address here. And so we asked the farmers, what does that mean to you? And basically they told us that means they're either having the animals longer on their farms and having to feed them more, costing them more money, or they have to travel longer distances to get rid of them. So many of them going out of province and sometimes even out of the country to get rid of them. And then it looks at, if we look at how long, you can see the length of time that they're holding longer than normal. Then we asked farmers, if we could address that capacity issue, what would that mean to your business? How much can you grow? And you could see the growth potential here is quite astonishing. And if you look at the number of respondents on the left-hand side, that's not that many farmers responding, but the percentage growth in all categories is very good. So we think that if we could address this this bottleneck, it's good for abattoirs and it's good for farmers. So then we did an abattoir survey and we asked them, what are your barriers to growth? And not surprising, there's three things that they said: labor, regulations, and financing. Labor and regulations, those have always been there, but I want to dive a little deeper on the regulation piece. And it's not the regulations themselves that's the barriers, it's actually the fair implementation of the regulations. Everybody agrees that food safety is the highest priority, but it's the fair and consistent and transparent implementation of them that is what really gets people, it's costing people money. And we asked the abattoirs, same thing. If we could give you the resources you need to remove to increase your capacity, how much can you grow? And again, the numbers are quite substantial across the board in all commodities. Oops, sorry. Let's go back. And what's really promising is it applies to small, medium, and large businesses likely. So on the small side, you're talking to small abattoirs, they're talking about increasing their businesses by $500,000. And that's almost double in some of their circumstances. On the large side, a large portion, 70% of them over $5 million. And in fact, of those respondents, there was quite a few of them were over $20 million in increases. So a really good opportunity. And when we add it all up with a $40 to $50 million investment, you could see an increase of $260 to $320 million. That's a 7-to-1 return on investment. And that's great investment in any standard. So that really got us thinking about, we got something here, we got to build on this. At the same time, we actually did another study that was on innovation and technology. And we were trying to see how we could do more with less. So it was in relation to COVID. And how do we look at workplace safety and keep people safe? And could we reduce the number of people we actually need to do manufacturing by automating? And we did an in-depth analysis of 4 different businesses. We looked at it from A to Z, everything that they do in their business. And we looked at business risk assessments, and we looked at health and safety assessments. And what we learned was we're really antiquated in the types of technologies we're using. I think we found it was somewhere between 1980 and 2008 on the far left is where most of our abattoirs are. Whereas we want to be on the far right, we got a long way to go. And so we identified what the current gaps are, and really it's in about, number one, it's about not being able to recruit and train people. And many of the businesses can advance technology-wise if they don't have enough staff to do the job today. If we don't get over the labor problem, nothing else matters. We won't be able to do anything. You can have all the technology in the world, you won't be able to implement it if you don't have the right amount of staff at the bare minimum. Clearly, most of them are in infancy of electronic systems, if not completely manual still, pen and paper. And that's a big problem and challenge in terms of amount of time it takes to process things. A lot of the plants are very old, so developing bringing new equipment, setting up new processes is very difficult. They weren't built for workflow. So it's very difficult to modernize some of these buildings. And that goes to the last part. We have a lot of aged infrastructure. So we have a roadmap that we've developed for the short term, mid-term, and long term on how to advance the technology side of our businesses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, because that's not the crux of our conversation today. But if anybody's interested, I'm happy to follow up. So from those two studies, we updated our meat and poultry growth study strategy to be global leaders of innovation and technology in the meat and poultry processing sector. So why innovation and technology? Innovation is the key to Ontario's success in being market leaders. We have the opportunity to build diverse set of products in agriculture and food. And so that really can set us apart from the rest of the world. The more flexible and nimble we could be price setters and not price takers. And the technology is really going to be the key to attracting the next generation of workers and the next generation of investors to advance the sector. And things that Applestone Meat in New York is doing is really exciting. They've made the modern day butcher shop available 24/7. You can imagine New York City, how busy it is. Lots of people work in the evenings, 24 hours. They didn't want to run a butcher shop 24 hours, so they set up meat vending machines all over the city. And you could buy a tomahawk steak at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's innovative, and that's attracting new people to work in these types of sectors. Excuse me. Our areas of focus on developing a workforce, building investments for infrastructure, innovating and developing new technologies, developing leaders, and focusing on developing innovation and renewal. So getting new people into the sector. We could grow the sector. That's an old slide. I apologize. It should be $1 billion in the next 10 years. We have about 10,000 jobs we need to fill. And that's just to get us back to where we need to be. And we're really going to focus on innovation as the key to drive this strategy. So the strategy elements are developing a workforce strategy. That's the number one thing. If we don't do that first, nothing else matters, as I said before. We need to continue helping abattoirs connect to the market and connect to each other. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And we're going to look at innovation and training and modernizing that and seeing what we could do next. And we have to start tracking investments. With that 7-to-1 return on investment, it's not just government that wants to invest in this sector. We need to start attracting private dollars to accelerate the growth in our sector. So one of the things we've worked on as a result from that pilot project we did is we've actually worked with ag sites to develop processor links. And processor links, it's in its first iteration. And what we've developed is we call it a abattoir dashboard. I think there's about 20 or 30 abattoirs online or about to be online in the next month or so. And what they're doing is we're giving a listing of when their next availability is and how to best connect with them. What's different about this, it's not going to be a static display. We're going to continue evolving this tool to make it more interactive and more automated. So we're starting this very manual. We're going to update it. We're going to tell you every time we update that listing what it says. Sometimes we'll get a call from an abattoir saying, hey, I actually have an opening next week. There's a special section that'll say new openings, and you'll be able to see if there's something in your area that's available. On the innovation and training side, we've developed the Center for Meat Innovation and Technology. That's a partnership with the University of Guelph, where we're using their meat lab to do training, to provide innovation services, and to help implement new technologies from around the world to help modernize our sector and to automate on a small scale. So we're looking at, there's a lot of automation in the sector, but it's really scaled for big guys. We want to see it for small and medium size. So for instance, we saw in Germany a company called Cantech. They've developed modular solutions, and one of the things they did was a mobile abattoir. But what was interesting about this mobile abattoir was with 7 staff or 7 to 11 staff, they could actually produce 70 animals a day, beef animals a day. And that's tremendous volume with such a little bit of space and a little bit of time. So they've really maximized what a processing line should look like. That's great innovation. And we got to look at that. With human resources is a problem. You know, I know a lot of meat plants that have 20, 30 staff, and they're only producing 20 animals a day. So if we can learn from them how to do 70 with 7 staff and to 11, I think we have some work to do. And the centers are really going to be exploring those opportunities. And so we're going to be doing recruitment training, innovation services, and technology implementation. And that's it. That's my presentation. I thought I'd leave it so that we could have some time. How did I do? A little bit over.
All right, Franco, lots of good information there. I might as well start off. What are you looking for from not just Grey County, but also the group? How can we assist your department to grow your business? How can we help you out, sir?
We'll definitely get the word out about processor links. I think that's the first thing. Let farmers know. The next phase of development for that software is we're going to track the inquiries from farmers, so we can start documenting how many matches we're making and what we're not making. That's going to help us understand where there's gaps in processing and quantify those gaps so that we can come back maybe in a year and say, hey, Grey County, guess what? We've received X amount of inquiries. We think there's a market investment here to work with your local laboratoires to expand their business. Or in some areas, it'll be that there is not enough capacity. Maybe that's where we got to look at investing in new infrastructure. I'm a big believer in use existing infrastructure as much as possible. It costs far less and it helps those businesses grow, which is good for everybody. But if we could where there's gaps, we'll then be able to identify where those gaps are in the province, and we could then work on fixing those gaps.
All right. I had one question quick too on the regulations, and as far as the barrier to expansion, are they from mostly provincial, federal, or local? Or a combination? Where do you find your
combination of everything?
Yeah. Okay.
Depending on who you're asking, right?
Yeah.
So on the municipal, because that's who you are, the biggest complaint I get is the length of time to get site approvals for building new infrastructure. I was in the city. There was a company 18 months just to get site approval. Like that's just crazy. How do we shorten that? How do we reduce the red tape on those types of things? That costs them money every single day. Every delay, it really, really takes time. And one of the solutions I heard in the US was a brilliant idea is whenever somebody's doing a build, they get assigned a case manager. And that case manager then helps them with all the approval processes. They line them up right after the other, so that as soon as they get the fire one, the next guy is in to do the next approval. There's no delay back and forth between departments, and it really helps get those departments working together. So that was an idea that I heard a few years ago that was really creative in what they were doing to help speed up the process for getting permits and things like that.
All right. Philly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Franco. That was excellent. Yes, I asked about the research, and the research is really interesting. And thank you also for the solutions that you're starting. You had some data that suggested that we are losing abattoir capacity at the same time the number of animals needing to be processed is increasing. And this is something we have been seeing in the data. And I'm trying to crunch the census data right now to find out what that looks like in 2021. My question to you, and this is not something I have found, and I'm hoping that it exists somewhere, is there data that splits the total number down into how many animals are moving into provincially inspected facilities, so OMAFRA facilities, versus how many are going into the CFIA federally inspected? I have not seen that data. Does it exist anywhere? And if not, what do we do to get that data?
Yeah, there is. So there is provincial and national data. It's fairly easy to get. Both of them are online. And Philly, I could help direct you where those numbers are so you could do those comparisons side by side. We did an analysis actually during COVID to see what was happening in federal plants, what was happening in provincial plants. And it was a really interesting finding. During COVID, and we did it across Canada, provincial plants across Canada had double-digit growth during COVID. Federal plants had low singles. They were actually slowing down their growth during COVID as opposed to all the provincial plants increased. And that really shows the need to invest in the middle more to build that resiliency and the need for that, because the middle, even though they're small, they have the ability to be most adaptive in times of change. And we saw that during COVID, that they were able to respond, many of them double, tripling their capacity during COVID and really meeting the demand. So we need to continue building that middle. Thank you. Great question. So remind me to get you those links, and I can get you where you can find that data.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right, Kathy, go ahead. Sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
All right, I was muted. Thanks, Frank. That was a great, great information that you shared. And I just wanted to ask for a link that we can share to people that for this processor links, or where do we find, like, you can share that information with us?
I'll get you the exact link. It's on AgSite's website, but it's easier if I get you the direct link to AgSite's, to the processor links.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lori.
I quickly looked at the AgSite's abattoir booking dashboard yesterday, and there at this point, there doesn't seem to be anything for Grey County listed. Is that happening? I see Philly shaking her head, but I also see her nodding, so this is good.
Yeah, we've invited abattoirs all over the province, so it's a voluntary. We don't want to force them to do it. So yeah, if you know somebody who's in the area that wants to list it, please get them in touch with us. We're happy to do that. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. So if others want to pop in, you could read about it. And then there's the link to the dashboard.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions, comments for Franco, again, thank you very much. Certainly like to stay in touch with you, sir, as far as developments in this area. We've talked about the importance of local processing to producers. It does tie into the overall profitability of a lot of our local farms. So again, it's something that we need to stay on top of. And if there's anything that this group can assist you with, please let us know.
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out and follow up on this, maybe with some local abattoirs included, and look at, what could we do, and talk directly with them to see what their plans are, to see what they want to do, and how you guys could help work together with them. That's one of the things that I think we need to do more of, is getting farmers communicating with the abattoirs and processors so we could work these things out together.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And you better get back to those steaks.
Appreciate it, everyone. Be well.
All right. Our next topic is Catapult Grey Bruce. I think Catherine Love is, Catherine is here. So Catherine, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks for having me. I'm just going to share my screen here. Great, so welcome and thanks for having me. My name is Catherine Love and I am the Executive Director for Catapult. We are a business accelerator serving Grey and Bruce County. Simply put, we are growing businesses locally through connections, knowledge, mentorship, and our physical space in Sydenham campus. Our services give businesses the opportunity to access the resources they need without ever leaving Grey or Bruce County. Catapult promotes local job growth, retains businesses and talent in the region, and drives direct investment. We are connected to our ecosystem partners, Georgian College, the Henry Burnett Entrepreneur Center, the Nuclear Innovation Institute, all to help businesses succeed. But entrepreneurs aren't only bringing jobs and dollars today, they're also addressing gaps in the market and future-proofing our economy. Our programming and mentor matching is critical to the success of young businesses. In fact, mentorship doubles their survival rate. Two recent examples of businesses that we've paired with mentorship is a local bakery, new in operation under a year, that we've matched with a food mentor that has experience bringing local products to retail shelves. The other is a local mechanical engineer born and raised in Meaford, who has developed a patent for farming equipment. And we've matched him with a larger agricultural equipment mentor and executive that takes prototypes to market. So to understand how we can support more ag and food-based businesses, Catapult and Grey County sought out the help of the University of Waterloo Corporate Innovation Project. The goal was to explore how we can help entrepreneurs ideate, commercialize, and scale their products. Their team conducted a series of interviews with a few key takeaways. Businesses want to see more mentorship. They want a community and peer-to-peer learning and some support services such as labeling, packaging, and bulk buying. The programming that they saw was most useful. It was for early stage startups, and other options included things like a commercial kitchen and food business program modules. So shown here is the current program, food venture program and modules that were offered in spring of 2022 through Simcoe, Grey, and Bruce County. And as you can see, there's a lot of areas to explore depending on the business stage. So for fall of 2022, our plan is to collect feedback via the Agricultural Food Survey, which Philly is going to cover in more detail later on, but also add a cohort and peer-to-peer learning opportunity for the farm to retail program, and pair businesses with a mentor in the food industry. We're going to follow up by sharing the success stories of these food businesses that Catapult and Grey County are helping to grow locally. I want to say thank you to Philly for this opportunity and Savannah for your continued support for Catapult. And I welcome any questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Catherine, for the update on Catapult. My question is, how's the program received so far by Grey County young entrepreneurs? Are you getting quite a bit of interest in the program?
Yeah, so for the fall of 2022, and I think Philly could probably speak to the spring, because I wasn't running the program at that time, but we're just starting to promote and engage food-based businesses right now. So I think I'd probably have to follow up with that in terms of interest, but certainly, there's a lot of opportunity for, businesses that are out of the farmer's market or even running bricks and mortar shop that certainly would benefit from this program in terms of bringing their products to grocery store shelves.
So help promote what you're offering, I think, is maybe key to the success of the program. Would you suggest? Okay, good. Philly, you have comments, suggestion?
Yes, thank you. I will just speak to the success of the program that was run last winter and spring. It was Tri-County partnership with Food Venture out of Toronto and Georgian College Henry Baronick Center that we offered the program. And we offered 7 spaces to each county for a cohort of 21. And Grey County ended up sending 9 businesses to that program because we had such interest, and those 9 businesses all passed the criteria screening, whereas the other counties didn't have quite as many. And we are hoping to get that kind of uptake again, and then continue to enhance that food venture partnership with additional mentorship, one-on-one mentorship through Catapult, in addition to the 11 course series that was offered before. So it'll even be a little more handholding, a little more skills development and support to get those products into market and help those businesses scale. So very excited about that.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions, suggestions from our people present? All right, I think we'll move on. Thank you, Catherine, for your presentation. That's good to see some, new businesses, opportunity to enhance their productivity and have access to that information. So thank you again for presenting. Take care. We'll move on with reports and updates. I think Philly is up first with her business retention and expansion update. Philly, go ahead.
I am, and I'm just going to see if I can share my screen here. Screen 1, let me change to, or rather screen 2, And let me change to from the beginning and see if we can't. There we go. Okay, so some of you know that back in 2018, the Tri-Counties, so that is Grey County in partnership with Bruce and Simcoe and other area business development and economic development organizations, conducted a business retention and expansion survey. In fact, some of you on this committee participated as interviewees, and I continue to thank you for your participation and your insights. So we are now 4 years out from those interviews, and it is time to do a review. I'm going to briefly, for those who do not know about the BRNE, talk about what it was. So, and what it was a survey. This is a standard survey that was developed by the province decades ago to help municipalities and other organizations interview businesses in the community to find out what they need to best meet those needs. So at the time in 2018, when we developed our survey, because we were looking at the entire agri-food value chain and across all of the sectors, we decided to combine elements from 6 different surveys, which at that time made it the most complex BRNE survey ever undertaken in Ontario. So we had elements from the standard business survey, a community survey, which was custom developed to ask about educational resources, business development resources. We also had surveys specific to primary producers, local food producers, processors, and manufacturers, and those businesses that overlapped in the tourism industry, so agritourism and hospitality. And here's who participated. We did a total across the 3 counties of 276 interviews. Those interviews on average lasted about 1 hour and 15 minutes, so they were extremely comprehensive. And the number of interviews that you see on the screen reflects the proportion of businesses in the community. So we had the most interviews with primary producers because we have more primary producers than any of the other subcategories in our communities.
Billy,
So-
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I
Yes.
don't know that your share screen has come through properly.
Oh, can you tell me what you are not seeing?
I'm not seeing anything from you.
Okay,
I apologize.
Then if that is a problem, because it seems I am seeing it just fine here. If that continues to be a problem, I will just continue doing this as a verbal. And as long as nobody minds, the slides are only informing my verbal presentation. Is that okay? I actually need to hear verbally whether that's okay with folks. Okay, hold on, let me see. Have you got it now?
There you go, you
Okay,
got it.
yeah, that was entirely my fault then. Okay, I will continue. And I will be doing that thing where I look off to the other side, so forgive me. What we discovered is that businesses on the whole were very happy to do business here in Grey County. 83% of respondents had a good or excellent overall impression of doing business here. Owners were very positive about living and working in the region, and 59% at the time, now I remind you this was 2018, said their industry or subsector was growing. The benefits included proximity to GTA, quality of life, at the time, lower costs for labor and housing, quality of land and opportunity for growth. And the hurdles included cost of electricity, access to internet, housing, and taxes. Participants told us that they wanted supports for innovation. Some of those supports, as we know, are being grown right now through Catapult, Grey Bruce, and other organizations. They're looking for new and emerging niche market opportunities and skilled and non-skilled labor, which we know has really come to the forefront in the last few years in particular. When we did the surveying, again, summer and fall of 2018, 53% of businesses said they were looking to expand, and at the time were experiencing barriers, the highest one being a lack of labor. And a number of our participants today have already spoken to technology as a possible solution for that. And of course, the financial difficulty with rising interest rates to make those technological investments. So These are the universal themes that were identified across the value chain and across the region, the areas that we chose to focus on. So business supports in general, municipal planning and process, so in other words, cutting red tape, issues specific to agritourism, which as a subsector has unique challenges and opportunities, general infrastructure, and of course, workforce. So in 2019, we began to implement a work plan, and this is an overview of the work plan. It shows you how we broke each area down by priority area and the activities. What you don't see is the expanded version that also includes the community partners and the justification for the work and when we expected to be doing the work in the calendar in terms of priority and ability to complete the tasks. So here's our business supports, here's our municipal planning and process, our agritourism activities, infrastructure, and our workforce priorities. Obviously, we got to work in 2019, and that was I guess it's spring, late spring, early summer. We really got to work in earnest on the work plan, and then COVID threw a spanner into the works. And not only did it expose in huge ways the systemic weaknesses across the agriculture and food value chain, some of which were expected, some of it which were unexpected. But it created major shifts in priorities for businesses across the value chain, and also county staff across all 3 counties were reassigned, which made it difficult for us to address some of the work that we had hoped to do in our initial work plan. So the world has really changed. We would have been doing a reevaluation on our 3-year work plan now anyway, but now we need to do it in a more comprehensive way. So what we are currently doing right now is completing a line-by-line review of our existing plan, taking a look at what has been completed so that we can report back to our municipal partners and the community to say, we heard you, this is what we've done, this is what our partners have done, and this is what is yet to do. But more importantly, we're also discussing the anecdata, what we have seen in the community that suggests changes to the priorities. We need to know from the community what is more important, and more importantly, what is missing? What has come to the forefront that we did not anticipate when we developed those questions 4 years ago? So what we're going to do next over the next couple of months is create a survey that reviews our priorities and our work plan, but also has input from community partners. Catherine will be involved, Catapult will be involved. We're going to have input from Georgian College so we can specifically ask questions about what people need around training to address some of the labor needs, which we know we actually have some opportunity to influence and impact, more so than some of the bigger infrastructure needs or the financial needs, which are happening at a higher level than we really have a lot of influence on at the county level. So once we do that, what we're going to specifically do is reach out to the people who completed the surveys originally to make sure we hear from the same voices again for that validation, and also open it to the general community to see what people need from us. And then we're going to revise our work plan for 2023 onwards. So that's it. Apologies for not sharing the first several slides, but I am happy to share this document with anyone who wants to see it later. Just a thank you. And this is just a quick list of some of the partners that we worked with last time, who we will work with again, and we will be bringing more on for our review. And yeah, that's it. I am happy to take questions, and if you have any insights, any ideas, or any requests for things that we might want to consider, I'd be happy to hear them.
All right, thank you, Philly. I think definitely it's a large project and worthwhile to this our region anyway, and it involves a lot of different sectors. So at this time, do we have any comments, suggestions, questions from the group for Philly? RJ.
Yeah, this is more just a comment. I want to say I was the willing recipient of Philly's many questions when she came and visited our farm at the start of doing the survey. So I just wanted to thank her and the whole team. Having her come and spend time at the farm, also collaborating with the town of Hanover and the economic development coming from Hanover to participate in it was just a really great opportunity to dive into some of our issues. And I think the whole experience unearthed so much more insight and conversation, and even helped us guide some things than just a simple survey. So I'm very confident in the types of insight that was gathered, and excited to see what the county continues to do with that. So thank you, Philly and team.
Thank you. That is excellent to hear. I really, really appreciate the validation. And also, technically, that was supposed to be confidential. So I'm glad you were the one who outed yourself as the interviewees and not me.
Oops.
No, you can do whatever you want. Thanks.
Thank you, RJ. Question to you, Philly. Were there any groups or sectors that you kind of did, I didn't get quite as much information or data that we would have liked to see to make this project more meaningful, or were you pretty happy cross-section from our area?
Good question. And I think we were very pleased with the data that we got. And it was because we looked at it specifically on a proportionate basis. We were able to say, okay, in Grey County, we're going to interview 2 distributors and 75 primary producers. We were able to get a really good cross-section of small, medium, large, diversified, more streamlined to specific commodities. We really were able to get a broad cross-section. And when we received our initial results back, we were surprised to discover, among other things, that the majority of our primary producers, regardless of what kinds of commodities they were producing, were serving into the local market. And I think in our minds, we probably had an idea that some of the larger commodity producers were sending their products out, and that was not in fact the case. So I'm excited to get validation about that again. And I hope that we will have good participation from the people who we already interviewed. And I assure you, it will not be an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes. It will be an online survey. We may follow up with a phone call, but I'm really hoping that we can keep it to about 15 minutes of your time at the most. It really is just a check-in rather than a full interview again.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Company.
Thanks so much, Chair John and Philly. I really appreciate the presentation. You mentioned returning to the original participants, and I'm just guessing there's probably quite a few new ag-related businesses in the counties since you did that initial survey, and I'm just wondering if you're going to focus on the original participants, Philly, or how you would go about including the new businesses and gathering data from them for the next BRNE work plan.
Excellent question, and this is already something we've discussed. We want to make sure that the original participants are included so that we can go out on a year-over-year, more likely every 2 years, go out to re-interview the community with brief interviews. We're working with our data analyst, Brad Noble, to ensure that the data we gather is something that we can take trends from. And we don't just want to have the existing businesses, we want to bring in the new ones. So I've been speaking with our communications department about a strategy for getting those requests out into the community. So it will involve newsletters and social media and media releases, so we can get as much participation as possible. And I'll probably just be sending out individual emails and picking up the phone, so I make sure specific people I know are new who may not be connected through some of those other avenues have an opportunity to participate. It is definitely something that we want to do.
All right, thank you, Philly. Any other questions, comments from the group at this time? Don't see any. So We'll move on. Scott, you're up next on our agenda. Affordable Housing Task Force verbal update. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just give a very brief update, and I also have with me my colleague Liz Buckton, who is the county's senior policy planner, that's going to provide a bit of an update too. So with respect to affordable housing, there's a number of things going on, both within the planning department and some of our partner departments like community service and economic development. This committee will remember that a number of months ago, we had a presentation on official plan amendment number 11. And specifically at the time, the official plan amendment was speaking to barn preservation and what to do with surplus farm dwelling severances and the barns in that regard. I will say there's been an updated version of official plan amendment number 11 just last week released, and we're seeking comments on that by August 15th. But more pertinent to the topic at hand, there's been a number of proposed changes in the official plan amendment to try to aid in the creation of more affordable and more attainable housing. So we're making it easier for people to have accessory apartments. So whether that's a basement apartment or an apartment in the house, or even an apartment above the garage or a detached accessory building. There's more guidance in there around tiny homes, similar to the presentation we heard from Emily this morning. There's more guidance on increased densities in our service settlement areas. Again, going to A, try to create more affordable housing, and B, try to preserve our farmland, which is outside of our settlement areas. So there's a broad spectrum of policies there. So if there's anyone in this committee that has an interest in that, I encourage you to review the documents and submit any comments. But we're hopeful that should this official plan amendment pass in the fall, that it will aid both some farm-related topics, but also affordable housing in that regard. With respect to other portfolios on affordable housing, the county has seen great uptake in some of our development charges exemptions. So the county has development charges exemptions for purpose-built rental units, and certainly in a number of communities across the county, we're seeing renewed interest in building new apartment buildings. And while not all of those are coming in at affordable prices, there is a need for housing across the county, and particularly rental housing. So communities like Owen Sound, like Hanover, Markdale, and others, we're seeing more interest in apartment buildings than I'd say the previous 10 to 15 years for sure. So that's positive. The county is also moving forward with a supportive housing project on 14th Street in Owen Sound. This is something that's being led by our community housing, our community services department. And they're looking at building 12 new supportive housing units in an existing structure in Owen Sound here. And that was through some funding that we received in that regard. And then finally, we've also requested a deputation to AMO with respect to advocating for more tools that would assist the county and our member municipalities on securing more affordable housing. So those are some of the big ones I wanted to touch on, but I'm going to turn over to Liz for her summary on an exciting project that she's been leading.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Scott. So the project that I have been working on a contract basis since January and a more fulsome basis since I joined full-time in June is with respect to the use of surplus municipal lands for affordable housing creation. And so we've been really trying to investigate what we need to investigate in order to make a process available that could go through and identify surplus lands, facilitate screening of those lands for suitability for affordable housing uses, and then put those through some kind of early preparation process so that they could be made available, perhaps at a discounted rate or on a leasehold basis for the creation of affordable housing units. Part of the project work plan, which I will note has been shared with the task force, and is available on, there's minutes and agendas and everything on the county website. So if you're interested in the project overall, please do feel free to take a look. But one of the elements that I had hoped to speak about just briefly with you today kind of goes along with some of the financial discussion that we'd had around farm costs and the impact of inflation and interest rates. And so we've been looking at I guess, updating our affordability thresholds to try and help guide some of the investigation work around creation of new affordable units. And with the release of the census information this year, I have had lots of opportunities to start crunching numbers and looking at how things have changed over the past little while. Still waiting on a special data order at the moment to allow us to do a calculated update to the affordability threshold based on provincial policy. But we have got some basic stats around median incomes and that kind of thing. And so what we're seeing is that, share a little info with you now. So updated median income for the County of Grey overall is sitting at around $78,000 a year. But one of the things I thought was really interesting as we're looking at some of the numbers initially is that median really does vary from community to community. So in the city of Owen Sound, for example, the median household income is around $63,000, whereas in town of Blue Mountains, the median is $101,000 for a household. So I think as we're developing our framework for surplus lands and the types of units that we might want to be targeting through that program, we will have to take into consideration the variability across the county. Like I said, we can't update those affordability thresholds on the PPS definitions, provincial policy definitions yet, but we do have a preliminary breakdown of kind of what income categories households may fall into. And so we've got roughly 40% of the population in kind of the high income categories. And then we've got the low and moderate incomes below that in around 60% of the population. We have taken some preliminary snapshot looks at rental costs across the county recently as well. And what I can say just on the preliminary assessment of information there is that it seems like our rental market, although the prices are certainly up, and I think there's a sticker shock component if anybody's looking for a unit right now, those rental prices currently are falling within the range that would service households with an average income. And that would be somewhere kind of in the range of $60,000 to $90,000 a year for a household. That's where our rental market seems to be accessible. Unfortunately, for folks kind of in the moderate or low or very low incomes, and that proportion has increased, the rental market is not servicing their needs. And so while folks may be in existing dwelling units, I think that what we're looking at is a restriction on mobility. And I think employers certainly will find that as a constraint because if they are trying to bring employees in, whether it's in the agricultural industry or otherwise, they have to live somewhere. And so really trying to kind of figure out how we perhaps use these surplus lands to bolster supply, not just for those very low income, which would be traditional social housing recipients, but also for those low, moderate, and even kind of on the lower end of the average incomes. The other kind of preliminary thought that I can share is just around ownership housing. And I would suggest that, again, looping back to that interest rates discussion, we will see that influencing affordability for ownership housing. We're at the point now where I think the Grey Bruce Owen Sound average sale price in 2022 for a residential property is in the $730,000 range. And the median is a little bit below that for 2022 overall at $669,000. But if we're looking at interest rates, a 3-year fixed is in around that 5.24%. It was 2% lower 5 years ago. And that really does make a big difference in terms of the mortgage payments that someone would be trying to make, and the requirement, I think, also for quite a large down payment based on the housing prices. And so when I look at the household income numbers, I'm really getting the sense that it's very much the high income or even perhaps the very high income categories that have ownership as an accessible option right now. And I guess some initial forecasts are coming out regarding maybe where housing prices will go over the next year. Folks are suggesting Royal Bank of Canada, suggesting a 13% drop year over year in housing price points. But I'm just not sure with the increasing interest rates as well, if that's just perhaps a wash, right? We're going up with the interest rates and down with the housing costs. You know, I'm not sure that we're going to see major gains with affordability there. So at any rate, I'm in number crunching mode with respect to that surplus project. We'll be coming back to the task force. A meeting has been announced in later September. And so I'm hoping to be able to share some additional preliminary number crunching insights at that point in time, and we'll continue along with the development of the framework as well for that screening and provision of surplus lands, hopefully getting into kind of a pilot site assessment in the fall as well. So happy to address any questions, and maybe a little bit longer winded verbal update than Scott had intended, but like I say, in number crunching mode, so there's lots going on up there at the moment. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Liz and Scott, for your verbal update. Any comments from the group for Scott and or Liz at this time? I don't see any other than affordable housing. It has mentioned more than once, even at this committee. So I'd like to encourage Scott and Liz to stay on top of this topic, because it's very detrimental to success of not just agriculture, but you know, the area in the Grey County as a whole. So thank you for your hard work, and wish you success going forward. All right. Next up on our agenda, I guess we can move to the correspondence section. Municipality of Tweed had forwarded a letter regarding the Ontario Wildlife Damage Compensation Program. I think normally we get a motion for acceptance on the communication. However, we might have was suggested we have some discussion. Did everybody get a chance to review the compensation program that was forwarded? Any suggestions, comments as far as the situation about wildlife damage compensation? Lori, go ahead.
Question, in reading this, I was wondering what the stats are in terms of the number of claims that come through Grey County on an average year. That would be interesting to know. Thank you.
Does Grey County keep track of that, Scott, or is it a municipal individually affair? Or maybe you can fill us in there.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question, Lori. Yeah, in this case, this particular program would be run. There's livestock investigators at the municipal level that the municipalities would refer individual farmers to. The county does have some programs with respect to nuisance beavers and coyote compensation. So if it was of interest, we could drum up some statistics there for a future meeting. But more specific to Tweed's motion here, that would be something that we would need to reach out to our member municipalities on.
Okay, so Grey County doesn't keep a handle on how we're doing from a predator perspective across the county. That's a municipal thing and we don't dabble there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we dabble in terms of the coyote compensation, but not maybe to the scale that the provincial program does. So we don't, you know, to be more direct to your question, no, we don't keep a direct handle on that, Lori. We would only know sort of the coyote compensation program.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kim.
You're on mute, Kim. Sorry, my question is just back to the staff. Do we know how many investigators are there actively under contract in the county? Because I'm thinking if it's like one or two, we could ask them.
Yeah, I must admit, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry. I must admit, Kim, I don't know. In preparation for this meeting, I was just kind of dabbling on different municipal websites. So for example, in Southgate, they list 2 evaluators. In West Grey, they list 1 evaluator. So we could look at the other municipal websites in that regard and try to reach out to some of those people to see if they can give us even some ballpark figures.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. So I think this item, I know we do have lots of coyotes in the area, and there's other areas, where there is damage to livestock. We might leave this topic on our agenda. We do need a motion now to that. I guess we didn't receive this information from Tweet, and then maybe we can follow up on a further meeting and see if we do need to take some actions, unless we do have council representation here from Hanover, and Councillor Kevin. Do you have any more information to the group at this time, or would you like to comment?
John, if I may, we have 1 evaluator in Meaford, and I'm sorry I don't have stats as to how many claims have been made, but I could direct you who to reach out to.
All right. I think the level of compensation at today's market seems inadequate, but I think we had some further information from from the group. We could probably make a better decision if that's agreeable. So I think at this time we will just maybe get a motion that the information was received, and we'll maybe add it to our next agenda, if that's okay. All right, could I have I guess we need to have a
mover and a seconder.
Mover and a seconder. So Brenda's got her hand up, and
I can move it. Yeah.
Yeah, mover. And do we have a seconder that we get back to this? Lori, thank you. All right, moving on. We do have some standing items. Scott would like to give us a verbal update on the Regional Agricultural Learning and Demonstration Site outside of Owen Sound. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, just very briefly, we've been continuing to work with the ag societies, the school board, and the team at Grey Roots on this project. I'm happy to announce it's been a long road so far. We are going to be submitting the Niagara Escarpment Plan Amendment application in August. So that begins their formal review of the proposal. And then aside from that, they've warned us that that is a 2-year approval process, so that won't happen overnight. But aside from that, Jill at Grey Roots is working with the school board on the Chesley High Skills Major Program to look at accommodating them at Grey Roots, potentially even in advance of that Regional Agricultural Learning and Demonstration Site being opened if it is approved by the Niagara Escarpment Commission in that regard. So it has been slow progress, but we are moving forward. And I will say that both the ag societies and the school board have been wonderful partners so far. Everybody's really excited about this project, and we're only starting to scratch the surface on some of the benefits we could see from this site. So hopefully we'll have some future updates, and hopefully at some point in the future, maybe we'll even get out for a walking tour of the site and get to see it and experience it in the future.
All right, thank you, Scott. And yeah, I know this group is pretty excited about updates on that topic. Great. Any questions for Scott at this time on that topic? No, carry on. We do have an opportunity for a roundtable discussion from different sector representatives to if there are any challenges or updates, any comments, suggestions from the group. Laura, you always have a whole list of stuff you like to present, so you might as well go first.
Okay, thank you. So first off, I wanted to let everyone know that the OFCAF, On-Farm Climate Action Fund, has been announced, and the sessions, educational sessions have been held. The program provides cost share funding for Ontario farmers to implement new best management practices under 3 categories, and those are infield nitrogen management, cover cropping, and rotational grazing systems. The cost share is available at 65% of approved project costs, and costs can be supported beginning February 15th, 2022. The intake will be open as of August 3rd through till August 17th. And an interesting portion of this funding is that farmers that are accepted have to get knowledge sharing points. They have to go to knowledge sharing events. A networking opportunity where producers benefit from the latest research, firsthand experience from their peers, industry experts, and access to information networks or resources supporting long-term implementations of the BMPs that this funding addresses. We are working with OSCIA to ensure that we can offer local KSEs, so people don't have to drive to Guelph or Toronto to get them. So we will be integrating some of these points within our Graber's Farmers Week program. So we already know there's at least 3 of our presentations that will be that will address this need to get these KSEs. And we'll also try and do some courses in the early part of our educational programming in January through to mid-February that will address these points as well. We're actually going to talk to OSCIA. They're gathering kind of the KSEs now. They'll know early September where the gaps are, and we'll try to develop courses that will fit some of those gaps. So that's that programming, and farmers are really excited. There's a lot of money on the line, and so great opportunities to try and do more for climate change. In terms of some educational events that are coming up, we have some Georgian soil and crop virtual crop walks. On August 12th in the morning, we're having a winter canola webinar. There's been lots of interest in taking pictures in our winter canola fields. And if you want to learn more about how you can grow them, you can learn lots in that 1 hour, 9 till 10 winter canola webinar. And you, for all these webinars, you just register through me. We're having on August 16th in the evening, we're having a strip till webinar. Farmers are using strip till methodologies. We had a webinar last year. It's going to be a kind of a continuation. 3 producers talking about what they've learned and lots of discussion for other producers to add information. And we're also having a virtual combine clinic on September 6th from 7:30 till 9. That's hosted by Dufferin Soil and Crop. The strip till was by Bruce Soil and Crop, and the winter canola is by Gray Soil and Crop. So again, register through me. We are working on Graber's Farmers Week. It's pretty well all, the agenda is pretty well all nailed down, which is pretty exciting. Graber's Farmers Week will be from January 4th to January 10th. We are hoping and praying that we will be in the Elmwood Community Center live. We are evaluating what we're going to do with regards to live streaming. As we keep talking about today, all costs for everything is increasing. Catering costs are going to be increasing. It's going to be a tough road ahead, I think, to meet everyone's needs. So we may have to make some tough decisions as to what we should deliver going forward. So our office, Emily and I, are going to be having a meeting with Graber's Farmers Week directors in September, and we'll make those tough decisions and go from there. But we are really excited by the program that we already have. It's so different developing an in-person conference now. Things like, can you get speakers from the US? Do they want to come? Can they fly into Canada? And who knows what will happen between now and January. So it's making it a lot more precarious. So we have a lot of plan Bs, and that's the only way you can survive in this day. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will pass it along to someone else to add updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Just to just mention on the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, that usually fills up pretty quick, correct? Like there's limited amount of funds available. It's a pretty large pot, but don't wait till the last minute. And there is a bit of paperwork involved with that one. And but I know from the past, similar plans, local producers have taken advantage of it, and it's 65% cost share, right? So it's worthwhile looking into. Perfect. Any other comments from the group? Concerns, opportunities? Brenda, go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. I just want to add to what Lori was saying about off-calf. Actually, there's a tour at my farm on August 27th through the EFAO, which is actually considered a knowledge sharing event for rotational grazing. And there will also be some online opportunities for training through Farmers for Climate Solutions, who have a farm mentorship program on all three of those things. So we're currently rolling out rotational grazing and cover cropping things. And so those in Ontario you can find through the EFAO. And we also have the grazing, which is being run through the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association, CFGA. So I've sat through all of those mentorship programs because I'm one of the members of the group working on the program. And I've got to say, it's pretty cool to see the information sort of comprehensively gathered in one place. Yes, Kim?
No, I just wanted to, I was just so happy to hear you mention the Farmers for Climate Solutions, Brenda. There was a recent write-up in the Canadian Policy Options document about the ongoing negotiations right now, the Fed-Prov territorial negotiations about the ag policy framework, and certainly Farmers for Climate Solutions advocacy around seeing some significant investment in assisting farmers with either GHG reductions or climate adaptation. So for the county and our climate change plan and all of the discussions that we've just started to have around climate change in the agricultural sector, that's really great to see. And I'm so happy to have you at this table when you're involved in that. So you can tell us all the inside scoop.
Well, I was going to say that actually. So I think Farmers for Climate Solutions had 5 particular points to put towards, the federal government for their new APF, the new agricultural partnership. One of them is near and dear to Grey County National Farmers Union heart. And I think Kim, I believe one of our members has already spoken to you on the phone about it. And it has to do with hedgerows and windbreaks and their preservation. We've talked about this numerous times before. It's kind of one of those, I'm really excited about this topics. And I think one of the reasons why we are very excited about this right now is that we haven't lost it all yet here in Grey County, but they're going fast. They take literally a day to get rid of when they've been growing for decades. So I just wanted to make a note that in the last Rural Voice, we did write sort of an article under our NFU page at the back, talking about how it's not like it's a whole societal benefit. And actually in Farmers for Climate Solutions, one of the recommendations was to look more closely at the preservation and the addition, taking back perhaps marginal lands from farming to put them back into waterways and these wildlife corridors and windbreaks and everything. So, the GHG that is emissions that are conserved by just taking marginal lands back from being put into cropland production, it's big enough that it's actually one of the 5 points that FCS wanted to bring up. So I know that this is always controversial, telling farmers what to do or anything of that sort, and nobody wants to have more rules added to what they're allowed to do with their landscapes. But I think the programs that we do have in place are not working because, of course, they keep coming out, right? And so, the question is, can we bring it up more at things like Great Bruce Farmers Week across all commodity groups, not just on Eco Day, and various other places, just to talk about this, the natural, I always forget the term for it. What is the natural, you guys did a whole plan for this and I always forget the name. Scott, can you help me out or something?
The natural heritage system?
Yes, that's it, natural heritage. We write about it all the time, but maybe there need to be more teeth in there, or maybe we need to be able to combine a bunch of information that's sort of sitting everywhere with OPP on traffic, with the roads groups at the municipal level and also at the county level, to see, what are some cost savings we would have if there wasn't the need for so much clearing of the drifting snow for the bad storm events and all that sort of thing. And of course, for the climate action plan for all of Grey County, to discuss more if we could target a few more things where we look at bringing all of society together, as opposed to just farmers doing this or just the roads doing that or whatnot, maybe and of course its influence just for the resilience of our county for the climate changes that are happening. I think that that's something that might succeed more as it crosses boundaries rather than as it's kept in each of its individual silos. So I just wanted to bring that up again.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Councillor Coveney, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may not be possible and probably mostly because there's an election upcoming, but I heard Brenda mention that there'd been a tour of her farm, and I just wanted to put it out to staff. If there are any farm tours upcoming, would it be possible for members of this group to be included or invited to any of those tours? So I'll just leave that with you.
Well, I'll just mention mine is slated for August 27th. Let me make sure I didn't get that wrong. It's a Saturday, I believe. And it's being run through the EFAO, but I could talk with them if there were local counselors or whatnot that wanted to come just to see what rotational grazing was, with the benefits of windrows and all that sort of thing. We actually, through the SARFIC program, have planted a first windrow into an old hayfield, which is counter to most farming practices, conventional sort of large crops. But given that we are seeing a lot more sort of large weather events, you know, we've got lots of drought, we've got lots of flooding, we don't have the sort of in between the more moderate weather anymore. Contrary to a lot of other farming practices, we're looking at trying to keep water on our land and sink it down into aquifers, as opposed to having it run off or get drained out of our fields into our waterways and, you know, being a surface water issue. And I know this is not a topic that Ontario talks about, because Ontario is super water rich, but this is not going to be forever. And one day we could be California. So I think the more we can think about really long-term having aquifers that are full of water and not just surface running off, you know, we do need to change a lot of farming practices if we want it to be the case where water is retained in our soils rather than run off the surfaces. So I mean that's a huge change in agriculture.
All right, Lori, did you have another comment?
I just wanted to add, and I know I keep going back to these stats, but certainly we're spending a lot of time looking at them. So I just wanted to read something. This is based on national numbers from the Ag Census. Land practice methods include in-field winter grazing or feeding, rotational grazing, plowing down green crops, planting winter cover crops, and having shelter belts or windbreaks. The stats show that in 2020, 64.5% of farms reported land practices, up from 53.7% in 2015. So that's actually a surprising number and counter to what we think is happening, Brenda. So I don't know, we haven't looked into our Ontario numbers and our Grey County numbers, but again, that'll be something to look into. Thank you.
RJ, or sorry, go ahead, Kim.
Just one question. The earlier work that I recall OFA having initiated around a discussion of environmental goods and services. I know Ben's not here anymore on the call, but I just wonder if there's any merit in ever having any of those discussions, either as part of the ongoing Farmers for Climate Solutions work, or Lori, if you're aware of anything from the OFA, but I'll leave that for another day. It's stuff that was talked about several years ago, and I haven't heard much of it since. It's certainly something that in Europe is used extensively. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Kathy or RJ, any challenges, opportunities within your sectors at this time that we have not discussed? I know we covered a broad range of things.
I'd like to make a comment about the importance of these conversations and this committee to continue. When I think about how the landscape of the agricultural conversation has changed in the last 2 years, it's shocking. Like, you can't turn on the radio now without hearing the term food insecurity. And it's not just about our local food banks and our people that are in the lower income levels anymore. It's worldwide. So again, just a comment how important it is for us to continue in this avenue.
All right, thank you, Kathy. So there are no other suggestions or reports on opportunities or challenges. We'll move on to, oh, sorry, RJ, you're going to
thank you, John. Sorry, I just I have to say, Kathy really took the words out of my mouth. I really find, as being a farmer and being part of the community, specifically around sort of Hanover, Durham area here, I really value being part of this committee from the information that I glean. And I must say, I found today's committee in particular, with some of the presentations that we had, and a lot of the discussion that went into forming the agenda, very, very, very useful. And I hope that what we're sharing back to all of you folks helps inform some sort of more collaborative and insightful and diverse contributions to what's happening. So thank you for the opportunity to be on this committee and be learning and sharing. So, and as Kathy said, I do hope it continues. I know we have election coming up and all that. So,
all right, appreciate your input. Warden Hicks, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to pick up on RJ's comment about learning, because certainly I learn a heck of a lot coming to these meetings. I should have maybe asked this question a little earlier when Ben had made his presentation. I know, Liz, that you touched on this theme as well. But around the whole, rising interest rates and affordability for farmers and the large equipment, I asked this question again innocently. What are farmers doing with respect to affording the equipment? Is there a co-op type of sharing of some of this large equipment, sharing and expenses? Like, does everybody have to have every piece of equipment? Are there any innovative things happening around so that sharing of equipment?
May be able to answer a few things. We do see a lot of neighbors or families working together where there's a joint sharing of pieces of equipment that are very timely. At the same time, when it's combining season, every combine that's out there has to head to the field. So even though certain pieces of equipment might sit in the drive shed for 11 months of the year, timing is very crucial when it comes to agriculture. We've talked about severe weather phenomena that affect our planting and harvesting season. A lot of the producers are looking to maximize the returns, as have been mentioned in previous presentations, which means that just growing hay and maybe taking one or two cuts is not a viable solution anymore for a lot of producers in this area. They do have to grow their soybeans, corn, and look at other crop inputs. We're growing potatoes in Grey County in the last couple of years, and that's a relatively new thing. That used to be an Allison or maybe a Dufferin County crop. So at the same time, challenges with repairs and maintenance of older equipment, parts availability, and people to be able to maintain those pieces of equipment. The only option is to go trade in an old piece of equipment and maybe refinance something that is a little newer and more up to date, rather than spending a lot of time and effort and money on repairs. So it's something that producers are always struggling with, I think. Kathy, any other addition?
I was just going to comment that a lot of farms use custom work where one farmer's supplementing his income by going out and harvesting or baling or whatever on other farms, because, as you say, the equipment is expensive, and sometimes it's timing issue. It's just cheaper to get it in and know that the crop is taken care of. So I just don't know if all of our counselors are aware of how that infrastructure works, but it works well.
RJ, go ahead.
I really appreciate your question, by the way. I might add in, I don't know if this is a common trend, but based on, chatting with my neighbors and some of the forums. So, the last 2 years has been survival mode for a lot of farmers, constantly needing to figure out how to pivot and adapt and keep sales streams open. I would say an experience at our business is we've had to adapt so much and invest in new technology to do that sometimes you don't, when you have a limited amount of dollars, you have to put it towards things you think are going to generate you money right away, and you stop doing some of the maintenance on your existing equipment and machinery. And that was fine 2 years ago, but after a couple of years of that, things start breaking down. And then, so you look for a quick fix, you look for a used piece of equipment to fill that gap so you can get back to doing what you're doing. And we're dealing with this with a Zoom Boom telehandler right now. Used to be able to buy them for like 15 grand. Great, pick it, slot it in. Well, now the used ones, if you can find, are like $40,000 or $50,000, and you can't really find them. So you end up having to figure out how to buy a $100,000 piece of equipment that's replacing. So I feel like the last 2 years have taxed our people, certainly. I don't feel like there's a lot of downtime or breaks. I feel like we're still pushing and surviving, which is definitely taking its toll. But we're also putting that strain on our equipment as well. So just some extra background. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, RJ. But I think to further and kind of Frank mentioned it's working with the community and maybe electronically find those opportunities where we connect different people that do have time and equipment to assist, processors and getting them matched up might be something that, we could look into and assist producers that are in time of need, that need work done and have not got the equipment. And there are others to do that, on a custom work basis. There might be an opportunity there. So I think this area could be fine tuned and shared, and there's some cost sharing that definitely could take place. All right. Any other challenges, opportunities, questions on this topic? We have on other business, we do have a verbal update from Philly regarding the Economic Development Officer. Philly, go ahead.
Good. I'd like to keep this short. I realize that we're over time already, so I'll try to keep this to about 5 minutes. So this is just about the Census of Agriculture. We have been talking about the data through the entire meeting. StatsCan has been rolling out data sets since May 11th, and about every 4 weeks, they drop another data set. This is specific to the Census of Ag as compared to the other census data. And many of the data sets that have been published on the StatsCan site are still at the county level, although some have been released down to the municipal level. And I've spent the last several weeks just checking in on a regular basis to find out what is there and to start to download and attempt to manipulate some of that data, although it's very rudimentary at this point. The federal analysis to date and the trend mapping so far is by region or province or specific to unique agricultural sectors. So an overview for the area is so far lacking. But as I mentioned earlier, our great data analyst here, Brad Noble, has been helping us with some data visualizations. And one of them specifically is about land use and land tenure. And I would like to share just 3 slides, and I'll get it right this time. I'm pretty sure I got it this time. Okay, here we go. So I found this very interesting. So this speaks to Emily's presentation earlier. We see the columns from the 2011, the 2016 in the teal, and the 2021 in green. And this is the land, this is the area in acres on this chart. And you'll see a significant drop. And there are a number of reasons for that. And the one we have not mentioned so far in our conversation today is that Statistics Canada actually changed the way they are counting acres in the census this time. So it's making it very difficult for us. We're comparing apples to oranges because they have taken out of the mix any farms that are not currently paying taxes, which means a lot of hobby farms. So people who might have a few horses or are raising some alpacas just for fun or whatever it is, if they are not reporting to Revenue Canada, they've been taken out of the mix. So add to that all the municipal zoning, development, the other changes to land use, whether it is acres being put into production because tile draining has been added or taken out of production because they are being renaturalized. It's really tough to know what's actually happening. So I just want to point out that we are looking at it, and this will inform some of the questions that we're going to ask.
Billy,
yes.
Is that, so when you say they're not paying taxes, it's that they don't report income sufficient to meet the threshold to have a
exactly the $8,000 threshold.
number.
That's exactly it. So they may be doing farming activities. They may in fact be keeping their land active and well maintained and returning nutrients to the soil. They may be doing a lot of good, maybe they just have a pumpkin patch, but they don't make enough money to report. That's exactly it. So they may actually be farmed and well maintained, but we're not counting them because they've been taken out of the stats. So that does change what we see. So very briefly, this is just the change in the nature from municipality to municipality over the past 3 census data intakes. And I'm going to very briefly show you what it looks like on this final one, only because we've actually missed one of our member municipalities here, and I'm not going to let you look for long enough to figure out which one it is, but you can see that Grey Highlands in particular has lost a lot, whereas West Grey has gained, and we really want to find out why, because at this point we don't know. So there's lots of questions we can ask so that we can get better insight into why those changes are happening. So I'm also currently working on trying to extract some data around animal agriculture that might help us not only with the abattoir and possibly dead stock removal questions that we've been trying to address, but also informing our climate change action plan, specifically questions around the impacts of animal agriculture on greenhouse gases. We're waiting for the province to do their number crunch. So OMAFRA does extensive analysis that is always excellent because they put it out as spreadsheets that are at a glance. They give us excellent high-level information about the county as a whole and municipalities that we find really very helpful. My understanding is that those should be released in late September, early October. Before then, I'm really looking forward to participating in a data review that is being offered by the Agricultural Economic Development Community of Practice, a presentation from Stephen Duff that's happening from OMAFRA. He's the chief analyst at OMAFRA, and he's going to be presenting his preliminary findings about the data on September 8th. And if members of the committee are interested, I will forward you the links. The practitioners are able to join. So Emily touched on some of the other reasons analysis is tough. Again, the fact that the way things are counted makes it even more difficult. The numbers are there. It's going to take several months to really find out what they mean, and we are slowly working on it. And Lori, I'm going to reach out to you and Emily and find out what you've been working on, and then we can share that information. So if people have specific questions about things they want us to research, by all means forward them to us, but I'll keep this presentation short with respect to getting us out of this meeting.
All right, thank you, Philly. Any questions, comments at this point regarding her update? Okay, well, that brings us pretty much to the end of today's meeting. Sarah, I don't think we'll have a date for a future meeting. We'll likely hear from you down the road. So if there's no other comments, that's correct, Sarah? All right, thank you. We'd like to adjourn for today. Thank you very much for everybody attending, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Goodbye.